So it's 10:22. I'm starting out a little less than an hour earlier than the last time I did this. But the last time I came back at 10 something. So I'm still going to come back probably around 10 p.m. There's lots of cars today. See that? So I expect to see plenty of folks. Oh, the Ranger. So let's get started.
Hello folks. Today we're hiking the Vivian Creek Loop to San Gorgonio Mountain. And along the way, I will be talking about one of my favorite hobbies, which is the study of diabetes. But first, let me describe the hike. The trail is 22 miles long and will take about 10 hours to complete. The hardest part of this hike is not the elevation gained, but just the sheer number of miles. The best part, though, is the scenery, and honestly, the camera will never do justice to how beautiful it is to be out here. I mean, just look. You just have to come out here and try it yourself. Now, I wanted to share my hobby because I actually think more folks need to know some of the details. Plus, if it turns out there is an interest, I can actually go further in depth, as I could probably teach an entire biochemistry class on this topic, and I love to talk. So let's get started with my first mile, and I hope you find something of value today.
So the first mile, I'm coming up on it. I'm doing about 2.8 miles an hour. I've gone up 446 feet. And looks like my first mile will be about 21 and a half minutes. And it's about 82 degrees. Of course, once you're hiking, it feels like 90 or 95. Let's keep going.
In the last video, we learned that there are tens of thousands of people, even more than previous estimates, who have undiagnosed diabetes. This is a problem because diabetes is already bad in those who know it, but it's much worse in those who don't. These folks suffer more damage and cost the system much more, and as I showed, it doesn't have to be that way. Now, 3 big reasons for this problem include macho culture, healthcare bureaucracy, and beliefs that hospitals make things worse. I also shared some simple ideas on how to fix this, like my own work, where I tested folks and discovered hundreds of people with likely diabetes who could then visit a doctor and treat it before it got any worse. But many of the people I tested didn't even know what diabetes was and didn't know the symptoms. Many thought that only fat people get diabetes and that diabetes was like cancer, in that only those with the, quote, wrong genetics got it. The most common misconception was that diabetes is not that serious, when the truth is diabetes is one of the top 10 causes of death, and it usually makes you more likely to die of almost every other disease, even common colds. This tells me that there's not enough information on how the food we eat in excess can elevate our risk for diabetes. So what is diabetes? Well, at its core, it's a metabolic disorder where the body is no longer able to control blood sugar elevations. Now, this is such an important point, I'm going to repeat it. Diabetes is at its core a metabolic disorder where the body is no longer able to control blood sugar elevations. Now, to understand why this happens, we need to expand our view across millions of years of evolutionary time. This is so important because many people look at modern societies without considering that for almost all of our species' history on this planet, our diet was quite different. Just consider the fact that until the year 1800, or the last 99.99% of our history, humans ate around 4 pounds of sugar per year. Most of it is honey or fruits. Sugar was rare and expensive, so sugary foods were only available to the wealthy. This means that for almost all of our history, sugar was rare and limited, so our bodies never needed to evolve ways of limiting it, since nature did that for us. It would have been extremely rare for humans to overdose on sugar like we do today. So this should help explain why we do a poor job of regulating excess sugar, well, because we didn't need to do it. But now that prolonged excess sugar consumption is a problem, can we use our understanding of metabolism to better deal with diabetes? Well, first we need to ask, what is metabolism? Metabolism describes the chemical reactions our body uses to assemble and power the basic building blocks of our bodies. There's many complex reactions, but we can understand much of it by looking at how our body uses the three main macronutrients, that is, protein, fat, and carbohydrate. Our body breaks them down to provide building blocks and energy. We rely on three because each has different strengths and weaknesses. Proteins are best as building blocks, but we can break them down for energy when needed. Fats are very important as building blocks, long-term energy storage, and aerobic respiration, but not so good for quick energy. Carbohydrates, on the other hand, are great for quick energy, and although they can form building blocks, they're not essential.
So just taking my first break, hour and a half, 4 miles, and about 1,500 feet in elevation gain. That should give you an idea. The elevation gain is much less than the others. You know, on some of those it's like 1,000 foot a mile. That's bad. This one, what was it, 4 miles and barely, not even 2,000. It's probably about 78 degrees. Feels like 90 because I'm hiking. Let's catch our breath and get back. I just passed a little river. Look, there's water here. So, as you can tell, it's nice and green, and it's just absolutely beautiful. Of course, you do get to see, though, the beauty of rebirth, all the greens, but you also get to see the tragedy, all the dead and burnt trees, a little bit of both. So let's talk about carbohydrates in our health talks here. In particular, it's one of the three macronutrients, but there's a lot of myths going on about carbohydrates, including the myth of the essential carbohydrate. Then there is the myth of high quality carbohydrates. Now, they're not completely false. It's just that the way that they are packaged, the way that those things are packaged, renders them practically myths. So, and that's one of the things that we need to clarify.
First, of the three macronutrients, only proteins and fats have essential components. In theory, you could go carb-free without suffering much, but you can't go without essential fats or aminos. Now, because carbs have molecular bonds that break more easily than fats or proteins, they are useful as rapid burn fuel and short-term energy storage. The thing is that, while carbs are in your bloodstream, they elevate your blood sugar and insulin. Now, this is normally not a problem if you use them up, but if you elevate your insulin too much and keep it elevated for many years, your likelihood of developing insulin resistance and diabetes increases dramatically. Second, the problem with the claim that some carbs are better is that in the real world, it becomes a marketing gimmick to get you to buy junk food. Marketers promise you whole grain products without telling you that they add only a tiny amount of whole grain. Another thing they don't tell you is even whole grain foods are highly processed and can raise your blood sugar, rapidly. And for those of us who have food addictions, whole grain foods just become another way to smuggle massive amounts of sugars while believing that we're doing the right thing. So although carbs are not essential, they can be a useful fuel as long as you don't forget they are a double-edged sword. And this is because the sugars that make up carbs have bonds that break rapidly for energy, but this reactivity makes them dangerous in large amounts.
So really, in the end, it's really all about breaking bonds. So with the glucose molecule, what you're doing is you're breaking the carbon bonds to convert this large molecule into carbon dioxide. So in case you ever wondered, where does all the food you go? It doesn't go out. That's food you didn't eat, technically. No, it goes out through your breath. That's where all your food goes. And as it's going out, it's turned into energy. I always like to think of the energy that sugar uses to power ATP. Now, ATP again is another interesting molecule. Let's talk about that.
To understand ATP, we first need to understand how sugar molecules behave. At the atomic level, glucose molecules can be thought of as little magnetic balls in the shape of a hexagon. To break a bond, you first have to destabilize the hexagon magnet, which allows you to split the hexagon in half. Now, the two halves of the hexagon are highly unstable, just like any bunches of magnets, and they try to rearrange to a more stable shape. The magic happens when this rearrangement is coupled to our energy molecule, which charges the molecule much like when you push down on a mousetrap. This mousetrap is the ATP molecule, which is ready to snap.
I always think of them like little mouse traps. Oh, here's the sign for the dry lake. And that's our direction. Little mouse traps that are powering us. That's ATP. And glucose is just a way of powering it. So this is where the trail, this is like the fourth time I've seen one of these. So this is where I came from. And this is where I gotta go through. But I got terrible traction, but I can't make any mistakes. If I make one mistake, I'm going on 1,000-foot slip. I will probably die. Yes, this scares me. I'm gonna pull out my knife. That's the only thing I have. I forgot to bring my walking sticks, and yeah, that's kind of dumb, but I'm here. Let's go for it.
A few minutes later.
That would have been death. Okay, let's keep going on our path. Let me put my knife away before I stab myself. So there's the plane wreckage from there all the way to up there. And then even further down. There's like, if you can look down there, you can see some more of the wreckage. You can see the wreckage from here too. And all the ice.
In order to use these ATP mousetraps, proteins have special pockets in them that exploit the mousetrap's energy when it snaps back to its original shape. For example, there are motor proteins in our cells that walk along tracks transporting vital nutrients. Another example are proteins that supercharge other proteins or sugars by transferring the spring part of the mousetrap onto them. One more example is a ribosome which uses ATP mousetraps and a codebook to build more proteins. Now there are many more examples, but the main idea is how energy powering all of this began by exploiting that shape change that happened when you broke down glucose molecules. So breaking down fats and proteins can also yield ATP energy, but the process is a lot more complicated and it takes longer. In the case of fats, the molecule is a long chain that is broken little by little to produce smaller, high-powered molecules. And in the case of aminos, there are various ways to break them into the same high-powered molecules. But in both cases, the process is complex and slow when compared to sugars.
So about 15 more hikers passed me by. It looks like they were like some sort of hiking club. I think they had hats that said 3H. And all of them were warning me that I might not be able to make it to the top. Because like almost right at the part where is the last part, they said there's like about 1,000 feet of ice. And it's at an incline. And it's one of those inclines where, just like the ones I just passed. But one of them said it's possible I might make it if I just climb straight across off the trail. I've done that before, so I might just have to do that. Let's go see what the ice looks like now. And I'm at that spot, and if you look, that is about 800 feet of snow, and it doesn't go all the way down, but if you fall, you're still going to slide at least a few hundred feet, and down there, those are rocks. You're going to get pretty badly hurt. So you probably could make it with those trekking poles. I didn't bring them, so sucks on me. So then what do? Well, if you look that way, you'll see that that's the incline. Well, San Gorgonio is right there. It's about a quarter mile away from here. So the scramble up this mountain, oh, it's going to be a butt kicker, but at least I'll survive. So let's go take that.
The problem with sugars is that one corner of the glucose molecule is very reactive, occasionally forming bonds with certain aminos that damage the structure of the protein it's a part of. Now remember that protein makes up most of your body, especially the important parts like blood proteins and nerve proteins. Thus, too much of this magical fuel will cause damage that builds over time. Now fats and proteins can also be bad in large amounts, but they are nowhere near as reactive as sugars. So sugar's very reactive nature is part of why insulin regulates it so much. Too much sugar results in insulin elevation, which then lowers the sugar. This is a simple mechanism that was good enough for most animals until humans decided to produce way too much sugar.
Why does it always feel like the last part makes you want to cry and give up? Is that little fat boy that couldn't make it to the end of the block. He's still there, and he doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want to. And all I can do is tell myself, just one more step. Just one more step. One more step. And we're almost there. Here I am. Oh, this is so much pain, and it feels so good. Oh my God, look at me. 11 and a half miles up. Oh, whoa. Oh, I still gotta climb these rocks. Ugh, my legs are weak. Here I am. I made it. I made it. A chipmunk. The hikers left some food for him, so.
The important point is that carbs, fats, and proteins complement each other, but in excess can cause problems. The problem of carbs is so old that plants evolved a way to deal with it by bonding the most reactive corners together, forming sucrose. Now, two final concerns include, number one, that calorie intake is essential to how destructive any of the macronutrients can be. Thus, people who do not eat enough calories can eat sugar and junk food and not suffer much, while going over on calories will magnify the damage. Number two is that humans are not robots that just consume fuel as needed. We have noses, taste buds, and memories of how food smells, tastes, and excites us that reinforce our desire to eat these foods. Sometimes we can become addicted to foods because they reduce our anxieties, elevate our moods, or flood our neurons. It is so important that we look at everything and not just carbs. You might want to look at your habits around eating, whether you are depressed or tired, whether you eat junk food, and how often you exercise. Not only that, but there are good quality carbs, and the best are the green veggies and the nuts. Fruits are great for most folks, and some folks might even tolerate some whole grains. Even cakes and sodas can be a part of your occasional parties, so long as you're not addicted to them and are honest about how often you consume them.
So, I hope that was educational, and I hope it explained a little bit. So you can remember, carbohydrates, they can be found in plenty of healthy foods and unhealthy foods, but there is no essential carbohydrate. They can be good in energy, and depending on your genetics, yeah, they can be great. Not everybody can benefit from them. If you got any questions, let me know. Take care.
Oh, and I almost forgot to give you my summary of the hike. Well, let me go ahead and share it along with this view of the 15th mile, roughly along where the smaller Dollar Lake is at. So the biggest challenge of this hike is not the slope, but the miles. So you need to pay attention and take regular breaks because you're going to feel like you can do it, but you don't want to do that because you're going to pay for it later. Now, you can also see the damage here caused by the 2015 lake fire, but you can also see the new growth. And the flowers around here were just absolutely beautiful and amazing. I think the only real mistake I made was to forget to bring my poles, which I'm going to have to remember to bring them next time because, yeah, you need them, especially with those little patches of snow. So I hope you enjoyed our hike together and learned a thing or two. And as I said, if you got any questions, let me know. Take care.